Welcome to The Deep Dive. We're your shortcut to getting well informed.
Glad you could join us.
Today, we're really going to dig into a pretty intense public debate. It features some very big names in media.
Right.
And what's really interesting here, I think, isn't just the people involved, but how the whole thing kind of holds up a mirror to, where political discussion is right now.
Absolutely. And how public opinion seems to be shifting or maybe getting more polarized.
Exactly.
So to give you the background, the source material we're working from today is, it's a pretty detailed transcript. It's from a YouTube video.
Okay. And
this video, it captured a really dramatic, quite confrontational debate. It was between Joy Reid, who used to host on MSNBC.
Right. Familiar name.
And Piers Morgan, the interviewer. Very well known. But there's another layer here.
Oh.
Yeah. The video also has this commentary track running alongside it. And the commentator offers a very, let's say, strong perspective on the whole exchange, often quite critical.
Got it. So multiple viewpoints baked into the source itself.
Precisely.
So our mission for you today is pretty clear. We want to unpack the main arguments flying back and forth.
Try and understand the perspectives underneath them, which are often, miles apart.
Right. And pull out some insights into how these really divisive topics, race, politics, immigration, how they get debated in the public square today.
Hopefully by the end, you'll have a clearer picture of this specific clash, but also maybe feel a bit more equipped to navigate these complex conversations yourself.
Sounds good. So let's start by maybe setting the scene a bit more. Talk about Joy Reid.
Okay.
For years, obviously, a prominent face on MSNBC, a regular host.
Yep, high profile there.
But the commentator in our source really flags this career shift she made, moving over to YouTube. And the observation made there is, pretty blunt. The commentator says her viewership can't crack 10K views on this new platform.
Ouch. Yeah, suggesting a really significant drop in her reach, at least according to that commentator.
A perceived decline, definitely.
And if you pair that with how the commentator frames her public image, they describe her as someone who, and this is their phrasing, blamed white people for everything.
Okay, so a very critical take on her style.
Very. So you have this context, this perceived dip in viewership, plus this already, controversial public image. It really creates a kind of dramatic stage for this debate with Piers Morgan.
Almost like it was set up for fireworks from the start.
You could say that. It felt like high stakes for her, perhaps.
And then you have Piers Morgan. How does the commentator frame his role in all this?
Well, he's painted as someone whose whole style, or at least a big part of it, is about bringing together people with opposing views, specifically for these kinds of confrontational chats.
Ah, the conflict model.
Exactly.
Wow.
The commentator actually calls it, pretty enthusiastically, the two fighting genre of content.
Right. Designed for maximum engagement, maybe maximum heat.
That seems to be the idea presented.
Yeah.
A spectacle.
Okay, so we got the personalities, the backdrop. Let's get into the debate itself. What were the big flashpoints?
Well, it dove right into some really volatile territory. One huge point of contention was Joy Reid repeatedly calling Donald Trump a fascist.
Wow, okay. That's a heavy term.
Extremely.
Oh.
And she didn't just say it. She argued he uses Nazi terminology. She claimed his actions fit, quote, the textbook definition of fascism.
Did she give examples, like historical comparisons?
She did. She specifically mentioned Hitler's Germany, Franco's Spain, Mussolini's Italy, really drawing direct parallels.
Yeah, it's a very strong claim. How did Morgan respond to that?
Morgan pushed back hard. He called it an over-exaggeration, an over-demonization of Trump.
They felt it went too far.
Yeah. He actually used an analogy from Chris Rock to make his point. Something like, if someone's murdered 8 people, stop going around saying he's murdered 9.
Meaning, there might be things to criticize, but stick to the facts, don't inflate them.
That was his argument, yes. And the commentator in our source, they strongly sided with Morgan on this. They felt the fascism label was just way over the top.
Okay, so a major clash right there on political labels and rhetoric.
Definitely. And then the conversation swung pretty quickly to another hot button issue, immigration.
Always a charged topic. What was Reid's angle here?
She focused on Trump's rhetoric, which she characterized as very harsh. She pointed to comments about immigrants being vermin or poisoning the blood of the country.
Those specific phrases that got a lot of attention.
Exactly. And she also brought up a specific, quite shocking anecdote. She alleged Trump had characterized Haitian immigrants as eating people's cats and dogs.
Whoa. Okay, very strong stuff. And the counter-argument.
Well, Morgan, and especially the commentator, they drew a really sharp line. They insisted on distinguishing between immigrants generally and illegal immigrants, or even illegal invaders.
So semantics became key here. The legality of the entry.
absolutely central to their point. The commentator was particularly blunt. They flat out said anyone entering illegally is an invader and needs to be removed.
Any specific language used by the commentator?
Oh, yeah. They used some pretty vivid, stark phrasing, like suggesting an alligator Alcatraz for removal, really conveying a hardline, no-compromise stance.
Okay. So, again, polar opposite views. It's important for us, and for you listening, to remember we're just reporting these viewpoints as presented in the source, not endorsing them.
Crucial point. We're just laying out the arguments from the debate and the commentary.
Right. And then apparently there was a moment in the debate that really shifted the dynamic, something unexpected.
Yes, a real pivot point. Piers Morgan brought up a fact, kind of unearthed it, related to deportations under a previous U.S. president.
Okay, and it caught Reid off guard.
Visibly so, according to the commentary. It seemed designed to challenge a particular narrative about immigration policy.
I'm curious now. What was this surprising fact? Any guesses from you listening?
Well, the fact Morgan dropped was that former President Barack Obama, during his 8 years, deported 3 million people.
3 million under Obama.
That's the number cited, making him, as the source rather pointedly calls it, the deporter chief.
Wow. Okay, that probably wasn't widely known, or at least not often highlighted in certain circles. How did Reid react?
According to the source, she looked genuinely shocked, and her verbal response was quite dismissive. She said something like, "I don't know and don't care."
Really? Don't know and don't care.
That's what was reported. And the commentator jumped all over that. They interpreted it as a major moment of vulnerability for Reid.
How was it?
They saw it as maybe intellectual dishonesty, like she was unwilling to engage with a fact that complicated her narrative. They argued it showed a double standard.
So a real gotcha moment, at least from the commentator's perspective.
Absolutely. They framed it as fundamentally undermining her arguments and challenging these broader narratives about past immigration policy. It really highlights how a single statistic can disrupt a whole line of argument.
Definitely a powerful moment in the exchange. Okay, so moving beyond those specific clashes, did the conversation broaden out? Talk about wider themes.
It did. It got into this whole area of identity politics, political arguments based on group identity, race, gender, etc.
Right. What was the take there?
Well, the commentator particularly kept hammering this point. They believe the race card doesn't work anymore. That was their phrase. And also that woke is dead.
Strong declarations.
Yeah.
Signaling they see a major shift in what arguments resonate with the public.
Exactly. They're basically saying that style of argument has lost its power. It makes you think, doesn't it? What social changes might be behind such a perceived shift, whichever side you're on.
It does. But what was Reid's perspective on identity politics, especially regarding Trump?
She argued the opposite, really. She called Trump's campaign the most racial identity politics-laden campaign she'd ever witnessed.
So she saw him as using identity politics extensively.
Yes, but the commentator flipped that. They argued Trump is actually anti-race because, in their view, he opposes anti-white races.
Okay, that's complex framing.
Yeah.
Using anti-racists in that specific way.
It is. And adding another layer, the source mentions some surprising statistics. It claims record numbers of Latino voters and more Black Americans were projected to vote for Trump in 2024.
Those stats certainly complicate the narrative that his appeal is purely based on, say, white identity politics, as Reid might suggest.
Right. It suggests the dynamics are maybe more complex than simple narratives allow. Makes you wonder how those voting trends actually fit with the rhetoric we hear.
Definitely food for thought. Did the debate touch on other contentious social issues?
Oh, yes. It got into the whole controversy around books in school libraries.
Ah, the book ban debates.
Exactly. Specifically focusing on what the source calls award-winning books that apparently contain very explicit sexual content.
Were there examples given?
The source transcript does mention things like strap-on dildos and anal rape as content found in some of these contested books. Very graphic examples used to make the point.
Okay, intense. What was Reid's position on?
Her argument, as presented, was that parents should absolutely have the right to opt their kids out of reading specific books they object to. But she argued against organizations having the power to get books banned universally for everyone. A distinction between parental choice and broader censorship.
Okay, that seems like a nuanced position.
It might seem so, but then things took another turn. Morgan brought up some of Reid's own past blog posts.
When?
From around 2007 to 2009. In these posts, she'd apparently expressed discomfort with seeing things like two men kissing or depictions of gay sex in media, like in the movie Brokeback Mountain.
So expressing views that might seem at odds with her current stance against censoring LGBTQ plus related content.
That was precisely the implication Morgan and the commentator were driving at. How did she respond to that?
She apparently claimed her blog had been hacked, that those weren't her authentic posts or they were taken out of context somehow.
Hacked? How did that explanation land?
Not well, according to the commentator. They basically dismissed it out of hand as completely disingenuous. Unbelievable, essentially.
So the whole exchange implicitly or maybe explicitly painted her as hypocritical.
That was certainly the interpretation pushed by Morgan and the commentator in the source material, yeah. It added another layer of personal controversy to the debate.
Wow. So after all this back and forth, these intense clashes, what was the fallout? How did the commentator see the immediate result?
Well, from their perspective, it was pretty devastating for Reid. They talked about her perceived downfall, even her irrelevance. They flatly stated her show no longer had value.
Pretty harsh assessment.
Very. And the source also brings up Donald Trump's reaction around the time of her departure from MSNBC, just to add another voice to the mix.
What did he say? He apparently called her one of the least talented people in television and a mentally obnoxious racist. So piling on from him as well.
Okay. So the commentator saw this debate as a real turning point, a kind of public dismantling.
That's definitely the narrative presented in the source. Now, if we zoom out, how does this specific, very public spat connect to broader trends?
Well, the source explicitly links it to what it calls a huge backlash to identity politics.
Connecting back to that earlier theme.
Exactly. And it suggests this is causing real tension within the Democratic Party. The source describes a split.
Between who?
Between figures they label pragmatic centrists, people like Josh Shapiro, Pete Buttigieg, and those they call radicals like AOC or Bernie Sanders.
Interesting internal dynamic described there.
Yeah, and the source even brings in Chris Cuomo's perspective. He apparently critiqued the strategy of just focusing on Trump bad.
What was his point?
His observation, according to the source, was that simply saying Trump bad over and over again, well, it doesn't win the race. It implies a need for a different approach, maybe more substance, less just anti-Trump sentiment.
So the source suggests this debate is a symptom of larger strategic questions and shifts happening, particularly on the left.
That seems to be the argument. It really makes you pause and think, doesn't it? How do these incredibly confrontational debates, the kind that get amplified like crazy on social media, how do they actually shape how we all consume information and engage with politics?
That's a huge question. Does constantly seeing this two-fighting spectacle, as the commentator called it, actually help us understand complex issues, or does it just entrench positions?
Right. Does it lead to more heat than light?
And it maybe ties into another point the commentator made. They asserted that freedom of speech is back and it's bigger than ever.
What do you think they meant by that?
Well, the implication in the source seems to be that this perceived shift allows for, or even encourages, these really direct, aggressive challenges to narratives that were maybe dominant before.
Leading to these kinds of intense, well, the commentator called them bloodbath debates.
Exactly. Where challenging certain figures or ideas can have, or is perceived to have, immediate and severe consequences. The source dramatically mentions the commentator claiming the race grifter was brought to tears and ended her career in this debate.
Wow. So the suggestion is we're in a new era of public discourse, more confrontational, maybe fewer guardrails.
That's certainly the picture painted by the source material, a real shift in how these battles are fought in public.
So wrapping up this deep dive, we've really gone through a lot, a very public, very heated clash.
Definitely. We've seen the clash of narratives, heard some pretty surprising facts thrown into the mix.
Like the Obama deportation numbers.
Right. And it gives us a real snapshot, or at least one perspective, on just how much public discourse is evolving, or maybe devolving, depending on how aggressive it can get.
It's a potent reminder of how fast things can change in these political and social conversations.
And as you, the listener, process all this, it's probably worth thinking about how complex it is to judge public figures and their arguments.
Especially when the information comes filtered through commentary or presented in these really emotionally charged ways.
Absolutely. Things are rarely black and white. Understanding where the information and the framing is coming from is just so crucial.
Which leads us to our final thought for you today. In this age where we're swimming in information, but so much of it is intensely polarized, how do we get better at telling the difference between genuine shifts in public feeling and just, performative outrage designed to get clicks?
And perhaps what role do we each play, consciously or unconsciously, in shaping the kind of public conversations we have?
Something to definitely mull over. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.